It's a video extra from the Mossad Files. I'm Dan Raviv. In our audio podcast every week, we take a look at the many strategic challenges faced by Israel with a special focus, when possible, on the intelligence community, including that agency, the Mossad. But lately, Israel's challenges go far beyond that. For instance, the still unsettled Gaza war. Our guest this week, and thank you very much for being here again, is Jonathan Schanzer. You are executive director of FDD, the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies in Washington, D.C., also a contributing editor to Commentary magazine. And I invited you to join us here on the Mossad Files because of your latest article at Commentary, because it seems to me that what Israel tried to do to defeat Hamas, to force the release of hostages still held by Hamas since the brutal attack from Gaza on October 7th, 2023, was to a degree to starve them out. That was my reading. I mean, there was an announcement by Israel that it would not allow the UN and other international agencies to bring in trucks. And that seems to have lasted. You might quibble with the details and go ahead if you want. But it seemed to me that Israel was pretty much not allowing food in, and then organizing with American help an alternative way of feeding people in Gaza. And the world community said, that's not good enough. No, not enough places to feed. And people, for some reason, are being shot dead, within those feeding locations. All right, our viewers and listeners, they know that. You wrote in Commentary magazine, in effect, well, you wrote this, flood the zone, like flood the Gaza Strip with food. But you said, as part of declaring victory, Israel should withhold something else. So, Jonathan Schanzer, what's that?
Israel should withhold construction materials. I mean, let me put it this way. I mean, back up for a second and just understand what's going on. First of all, I cannot tell you whether there's enough food getting in, too much food getting in. There's a fog of war, and that fog is thick. And I think that the actors right now that are blaming Israel for the alleged nutritional challenges in Gaza, they are people with an axe to grind, whether it's the Qatari-owned Al Jazeera, whether it's the Gaza Ministry of Health, whether it's the UN, which had a monopoly on the delivery of food, and that monopoly has been broken by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. All of these actors have a reason to try to point a finger at Israel or at the GHF, or a combination of the two. And what worries me right now is that the thing that's always separated Israel from all of its enemies around the region, the autocratic states, the terror supporting states, the terror proxies, it was always Israel's morality. And when you start to see these allegations being made against Israel, right, this idea of collective punishment, it does not sit well with me. This does not feel like the Israel that I think we all know. Now, I do know that they've tried to change aid delivery. I know that they've tried to get a handle on it because of UNRWA's problematic involvement with Hamas, the UN's general disposition to be anti-Israel. There's every reason for Israel to want to manipulate that system and to change it. Maybe even to break it and to rebuild it. But when you start seeing these allegations, I just think that is a moment where Israel needs to sit up and understand that the game has changed. Now, from there, I think you need to understand something else. Israel has won. Now, it doesn't feel like a win because Israel still is trying to get 20 live hostages and 30 dead hostages out of the Gaza Strip. And it's taking this drubbing in the court of public opinion right now. It doesn't feel like much of a victory. But when you look at the leadership of Hamas that is left right now in the Gaza Strip, I don't recognize any of them. And I've been studying this group since the 1990s, right? We know that there are a handful of people, known figures that are abroad in places like Qatar and Turkey. But in terms of players on the ground inside the Gaza Strip, we hear about one guy, Izzadin al-Haddad, is the new guy that replaced Mohammed Sinwar, who replaced Yahya Sinwar. I mean, we're now like at a third tier, right, of leadership. These are not people that are worth Israeli soldiers dying to try to capture, right? You have IDF soldiers that are being killed on the battlefield for minimal gain right now. I think it's time for Israel to say the war, the war aims have been achieved because they have the Hamas of October 7th is a shadow, or rather, the Hamas now is a shadow of a Hamas of October 7th. They just don't have the same capabilities. They
I want to
cannot.
get back in a moment to your key idea that's new,
Yeah.
which is to withhold Reconstruction
Well,
materials.
so
But a little, just a little thing I'm curious because your article in commentary in that magazine did begin with the KIAs, with the
yeah,
nearly daily reports in the Israeli media that another
correct.
soldier and a group of soldiers have died. And you know Israel very well. I think I do too. It really hurts society,
Of
as does the
course.
ordeal of the
Right.
hostages.
So again, so if what you're seeing is that right now Israel is under assault for, crimes real or imagined. And on top of that, they've achieved their war objectives. And on top of that, they're losing soldiers for minimal strategic gain in the Gaza Strip. To me, it seems like this is a moment to stop the fighting, to pause
Okay,
it.
now some people would say, but Jonathan, some people would say, stop the fighting, right? Call it a win, make a deal, of course. I want to be clear. I think you're still speaking in the context of a deal,
Oh, I'm not. This is unilateral. What I'm
okay.
talking about is unilateral, where Israel declares we're stopping the fighting. We're no longer inserting thousands of soldiers into the Gaza Strip. We've achieved the vast majority of our war aims. We are, of course, still trying to get back those hostages. And, we'd like to see the remaining Hamas leadership exiled or killed. Exiled is probably what you can demand. You could, make demands for the handing over of rockets and other heavy weapons. And maybe even make demands for engineers to get into those tunnels to map them and to ultimately either flood them or destroy them. Um, in exchange for Hamas doing all of that, Israel would provide construction materials for the Gaza Strip and allow for the Gaza Strip to be rebuilt. But if they do not get all of those things from Hamas, Hamas continues to preside over a Gaza Strip that just will not see reconstruction. Israel does control what comes in and out of there. So flood the zone with food, pull your troops out, and say, we're waiting. Now, it's possible, and people have told me this. Well, of course, Hamas is not going to meet those demands, and then they're going to start to cry that Israel is depriving them of construction and more war crimes and collective punishment. Look, it's one thing to say, no construction. It's another thing to say no food. I don't want to see Israel say no food. Feed everybody, but make it clear that if you want to start to rebuild and to have Gaza return to something that looks, I don't know what normal was like before, but to have it look more like a normal territory with functioning electricity and water and Wi-Fi and, having apartments rebuilt again. These are things that no country would be expected to do so long as their enemy was holding hostage captive. I don't think Israel is going to have the same battle in the public relations space over reconstruction as they would over nutrition. And that's why I think Israel possibly has some leverage here. And I think look, I don't want to tell you that Israel should just do what I say and it's all going to work out, because obviously I don't know how this thing works out. But I think that we need to change the channel here. This has not been a particularly kind news cycle to Israel, and they've run out of options as it relates to negotiating for those hostages. And it doesn't look like that fighting in Gaza is accomplishing that much anymore. So for me, it looks like it's time to change the script. And this, to me, seems like an important way or a possible way of doing it. Now, the last thing that I'll just note here, Dan, is there are going to be those in Israel, certainly those on the right, that say, well, I don't want to give up fighting altogether because, Hamas is still going to pose a threat to Israel. Here's what I say. You don't have to stop. What you shouldn't probably do if you're Israel is to have thousands of fighters on the ground for negligible gain. You've reached that point of diminishing returns. But if you see a rocket launcher that's being placed in somewhere in Gaza and there is a rocket that is going to be launched imminently, bomb it, destroy it. If you see a cell of Hamas fighters approaching Israeli territory, bomb them, destroy them, right? There's nothing that says that Israel can't continue to neutralize threats as they appear. By the way, also, if Israel gets intelligence on where some of these hostages are being held and they want to do an extraction, they want to carry out a special forces operation, they should do that too. In other words, Israel should be able to, in Gaza, do what it's already doing in the West Bank or in Syria or in Lebanon. Freedom of action, but that doesn't mean a hot war that's going on that puts thousands of Israeli lives at risk and that sustains a high level of intensity in the war. There is probably of lowering the temperature and then basically telling Stephen Witkoff, Donald Trump's envoy to the Middle East, say, look, we've said that we're open to negotiating. We're open to Hamas delivering on our demands, and then we'll do things in return. But until then, no construction. There will be no Gaza Lago. There will be no Riviera on the Med. There will be none of that because we're not going to allow for it. And why would we? This is an enemy that is still in control of the Gaza Strip, that still has 50 hostages in their possession. There's no reason why Israel should accede to any of their demands.
I seem to recall, well, I'm sure I do, in the years before 2023, when cement and other construction materials got into Gaza, often with an international aid agency believing it would be used to build schools, desalination plants, something good. Instead, Hamas used that to build tunnels and get ready for war. So I can see you wanting to eliminate that possibility, but I'm wondering if construction stuff is really that important to Hamas in the context of them not really caring if the Gaza people suffer because it's good for their ideological revolutionary argument.
So I thank you for asking that question. I'm glad you raised it, and I should have raised it earlier. Here's the way I look at it. And look, again, I'm one guy, one analyst picking up on different signals that other people do. But if you've been watching the Gaza Strip, people are not happy, right? You've seen the protests. You've seen this guy, Yasser Abu Shabab, the guy that runs this militia that's running, it's essentially running counter to Hamas and challenging Hamas's monopoly on aid and food. What we're seeing is, I think, increasing signs of a restive population. They're getting grumpy over there. And by the way, for good reason. I think the same reason the Israelis are grumpy. They've been at war for 650 days. But the difference is that they're living there under circumstances that the Israelis aren't living. I mean, when you look at the sheer destruction in the Gaza Strip, you see the videos. I was standing not too long ago on the border with Gaza with binoculars looking in, and the amount of twisted metal and destroyed concrete and just, homes that are just, people are unable to live in them. If the people of Gaza understand that nothing is going to change for them at all, physically on the ground, that they'll have food, but nothing else, right? They will not get anything else rebuilt until changes start to happen. That may be the moment that they start to put the pressure on Hamas directly.
And I noticed, Jonathan Schanzer, in some humility, you said maybe you don't know. You're saying other things aren't working, trying to minimize or control the flow of food, which is what Israel tried to do, didn't work and has sullied Israel's image worldwide. But you did admit that even making an announcement, you're withholding all the concrete and cement and metal stuff. That'll get condemned as well. I mean, what's your attitude about that? Israel's in a no-win right now, and still 50 hostages, 20 alive, are being held.
Right. But again, I would argue that right now you got nothing to lose, right? We just crapped out with negotiations, right? Witkoff was unable to deliver on those hostages. He was leaning on Hamas. Hamas said no. Hamas understands that if they relinquish more hostages, that they're likely losing whatever leverage they have left. And so it's not in their interest to do this. And they know that as long as the status quo remains, Israel's going to get hammered in the media day in and day out, right? That's what's happening, right? This is redounding to Hamas's benefit, and it is a detriment to Israel. That is the status quo right now. The status quo needs to change. Now, I will never tell you that Israel just needs to surrender and stop fighting. I think what Israel can do, though, is use what leverage it has. And right now, there's not a lot of it. They have military leverage where they're able to do more damage to Gaza. But again, I see diminishing returns there. I'm not sure how much they gain by killing another 10, Hamas operatives, or 20 or 100 for that matter. You're still looking at a bunch of youth that were not fighting before. Some of these are kids, by the way, 13, 14, 15 years old, that have been recruited since the October 7th attacks because they don't have any more trained fighters in the ranks of Hamas. It has been thinned out to the point where, does it really matter, how many more of these, ragtag fighters taken off the battlefield? I would just say that right now, given where we are, right, the frustration that's mounting inside Israel because of the loss of the soldiers, the frustration over the perception in the international media, the frustration of not getting those hostages out, Israel needs to change the channel. It needs to put something else on. It needs to set different terms using whatever leverage it has. I think the leverage that it has right now is Reconstruction. And if they basically make it very clear what their terms are, stop fighting for a time, with obviously some exceptions when threats are imminent, see whether this works. And by the way, if it doesn't work, here's the beauty of the idea that I'm putting forth here. Israel can always go right back to war. Not that I think that it's the preferable outcome, but if they don't get anything by trying something new or different, they can go back to the same old. I just don't have a lot of confidence right now that it's going to yield the benefits that it perhaps was even yielding up till a few months ago. Something has fundamentally changed on the battlefield. Something has fundamentally changed in terms of the dynamic between Israel, the United States, Hamas, maybe even some of the international community, the French, the Brits, and others that have truly grown tired of this war. I think Israel needs to heed what it's hearing and try to figure out a different way forward.
All right. Well, before I let you go, because I know you're busy, you're very much in demand, give me a response to, I guess, 3 points I will bring up. So respond to any that you will, because in the background, Prime Minister Netanyahu may find that hard to do. He's decided to fight this one out and achieve victory, and he has those right-wing ministers in his government who are not going to be satisfied with flooding the zone with food because it looks like rewarding Hamas. Second point, President Trump, just the other day, sounded like he was deeply affected by the front pages of newspapers and magazines around the world. Starving children are seen, and Trump said, "Those children look hungry to me," and he was telling the Israelis to start feeding them. Well, maybe your plan is almost an answer to that. I guess my third point is whether the announcement by France, and to a degree the United Kingdom, maybe other countries, that they plan to recognize a Palestinian state, also encourages Hamas to hang in there and not make a deal, right? There are a lot of negatives toward making a deal.
Yeah, and I think absolutely, as it relates to the French and the Brits, and the Saudis to some extent, right? This push for a Palestinian state when there is no viable Palestinian authority, and all of this really does look like it is a reward to Hamas for having stuck it out and continue to fight against Israel. This really does look like a rewarding of hostage taking and murder and an unwillingness to negotiate. Does it directly redound to Hamas's benefit? Not right away, but it certainly could over time. And so I think there's something just horrific about the historic echoes here of the Brits and French trying to redraw the map of the Middle East. We saw this in Sykes-Picot in 1916, and it has created a map that has been a disaster for the Middle East for more than a century. And here they are again saying, we're going to change the map of the Middle East. I think let's not forget here how detrimental both countries have been to the region. As far as Trump is concerned, look, I think he absolutely is seeing this. And this is, again, the Israelis need to be aware that the tone is shifting. Even amongst Israel's friends, the tone is shifting. They're growing alarmed. Again, I'm not here to tell you that Israel has deprived Gaza of aid. There are plenty of people in Israel and at GHF that say that that's not true, that there's plenty of aid that's coming in. It doesn't matter right now, right? Perception is reality. Fix the perception and make sure there's enough food because it's the right thing to do.
I
It's
guess your
exactly
point
what
about
Israel has to do.
President Trump is almost your ultimate example of even your friends are beginning
Yes.
to have doubts about Israel.
And if they're having those doubts, and the United States and Donald Trump is, among Israel's best friends. I mean, just worked with the Israelis to bomb the Iranian nuclear facilities, and now he's raising doubts about whether they're doing the right thing as it relates to nutrition in Gaza. I'm sorry, put an end to that yesterday, right? Stop it now, because Israel's morality has always been its most important asset in this region. It cannot afford this. So then that gets back to, okay, what do you do? And really, like, can Bibi afford to do this? Look, first I'll just say, Bibi, I think, can run again and probably win again. And I think he knows this, and he's trying to decide when and how he will run again. We have the Knesset on recess right now, and it will be until, I guess it's October. So Bibi has some time where he can actually do this without really risking anything. And he can take a gamble by trying something and pausing and seeing what happens if he makes an announcement along these lines, and see whether that pressure begins to trickle down to Hamas. If he has to run again, I think he can, and I think the numbers look okay from what I can tell. But I also have to say this, that if Bibi makes it clear that he's going to maintain the option of attacking, striking, going in, and by the way, also maintaining the control over all the borders, the Philadelphia corridor between the Gaza Strip and the Sinai Peninsula, the Morag corridor, which cuts across roughly the bottom third of the Gaza Strip, the Netzarim corridor, which runs across roughly the top third of the Gaza Strip. All of these things, if Israel maintains control, but just doesn't deploy thousands of fighters, what that does is it means, hey, we still actually, we've got our guns trained on the bad guys here, and we're ready to pull the trigger whenever we need to. We're just not right now as we try something different, because most of our war aims have been achieved. That's not a bad message, I think, for Israel to hear. It comes at this problem from a position of strength, not weakness. Look, again, I don't want to say that I've got it all locked down. I know that I don't. I'm sure there are plenty of things that I'm missing here, but I do know that the status quo at this moment feels unsustainable. The news cycle for Israel has been brutal. The responsibility that Israel is starting to feel as it relates to Gaza, it's large, it's heavy. And so Israel needs to move quickly to solve this problem, and maybe, just maybe, this is an answer.
Jonathan Schanzer has outlined so much of that for us, and your article is in Commentary Magazine, where you're a contributing editor, and you are, I think it keeps you most busy of everything you do, Executive Director of FDD, the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Jonathan Schanzer, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Dan.
And just a reminder, you can hear the audio version of the Mossad Files every week on all the major podcast platforms. And please tell your friends about the Mossad Files. You can comment to me. I'm on X at Dan Raviv, also on Blue Sky and Facebook. And just a quick reminder that my most recent book about Israeli intelligence, kind of a history of the Mossad, is co-authored with Yossi Melman. The name of the book, Spies Against Armageddon: Inside Israel's Secret Wars. Until next time on the audio version of the Mossad Files, thanks for watching this video extra. I'm Dan Raviv.